Gentlemen, welcome back. My name is Joe Gordon, and of course, you are with Performance Talk. Again, my partner's not here. That's okay. We've talked, and we'll be back soon, and looking forward to that. Our guest today, and hopefully I pronounce her name right, Alex Hubelbank.
Wow. Thank you.
Okay.
Most people, I was going to say, whoo, we didn't talk about that in advance, but you
That's
did
all.
get it right. So
Hey,
I
usually
appreciate that.
I am the butcher of names. I'm just here to tell you. So I give everyone a try live, and I can't be embarrassed. So if I mess it up, then I
I
apologize,
love it.
and we keep moving.
Wow.
So Alex, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started doing this.
Yeah. So I am a physical therapist, athletic trainer, strength coach, not necessarily in that order. But I primarily work in the NBA space now on the private side. I've spent time with two different teams. I've spent time in professional rugby at varying points, and prior to that, I was living in Boston and spent about 12 years there, kind of working in a variety of different sports, and actually left the industry for a couple of years and somehow landed myself. I'm
We're gonna
currently,
talk about
yeah,
that, but go ahead.
yeah. I'm currently in Miami, but that doesn't last super long. I take a lot of flights, travel, and get an opportunity to see the world. And if you had asked me even 3 years ago whether I would be doing something like this, I would have said, you are out of your mind. So I kind of split my time mostly between doing more physical therapy type things and performance coaching. And I guess kind of my
You know that
claim to fame. Yeah,
you know that's two full time jobs, right?
absolutely two
Okay,
full-time jobs. Thank you for reminding me. I've been thinking about that
just
a
letting
lot
you know.
recently. Yep, definitely two full-time jobs.
Yeah.
But the thing that I spend the most of my time doing is kind of working backwards from, okay, what is the desired goal? What is the primary rate limiter? And then what are all the things that we need to bring into play to be able to move the needle for this person? And I think that's probably the thing that I'm the most passionate about, which is why having the three prongs of titles is one thing, and the educational aspect of that, but really being able to sit down and look at, okay, what are all the things we need to bring into the conversation to help these players or patients or athletes or whoever get from where they are today to where they want to go.
Okay, so you kind of have an old school background because you can look at me, you can tell.
Ooh.
So I'm old, right?
Mm. I
Gonna
wasn't going to say it.
we're just gonna say that one time, and then we're gonna keep moving. But back when I was coming into this, what we call performance now, it was all just considered weightlifting. We're talking about 1985. So were you born yet? I,
Hey, hasn't
yeah,
anyone ever taught you? Don't ask a woman her age.
yeah,
No, I
I
was not
was,
born yet in
I was,
1985.
I wasn't asking you your age. I was just saying, were you born yet?
I was not.
There was a compliment in there if you would have said yes.
I appreciate that.
But
Close, but not quite.
so you're probably I can understand your background because that's the road that those of us who wanted to do what we're doing now in the profession had to take. We had to be, part physical therapist, part, then called weightlifting coach, but part strength coach, part, psychologist, part nutritionist. We had to do a little bit of everything. Therefore, it was relevant and important to get educated in everything. Thus, and I don't say this too much because I've never claimed to be the sharpest pencil in the box, but that's how I stumbled upon a doctorate degree because I just kept
Yep.
going. I just kept going to school, going to learn this, going to learn that, going to do this, and with those experiences, without so we can stop talking about me and talk about you. I understand where you are,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
it's
being in the
interesting.
private sector, and yeah, go ahead. So you got down to Miami. You didn't think 3 years ago you didn't think you would ever be in this position. So how did you get here?
Mm.
What was the? There are a lot of young professionals out there, and when I say young, I mean younger than you, that are just getting ready to start opening the doors. What do you tell them?
Yeah. Yeah, I have that conversation a lot because I know just from my experiences, I did not take a very linear path, and that's something that I am very passionate about as well.
Yep.
Is getting people to understand that it's okay to take a different road, and
Right.
oftentimes, my first direction change was a little bit forced, but I've started to open my minds of okay, what is the most right thing for me right now? And to answer your question about how I got here, a lot of it was being very vocal and being very intentional. So back in 2014, I had graduated from Boston University with my degree in athletic training. I loved the profession. I knew I was going to go to PT school at some point. I had hoped that PT school was going to happen right at the tail end of that. But that's what I mean about a forced break. And I was sort of sitting in Boston saying to myself, well, what am I going to do? Because if you know anything about athletic training and the landscape of
Yep.
pay in the profession,
Yep.
it's not great. And because I knew I was going to pursue an additional degree, I kind of just sat with myself and said, okay, well, where do I want to live? How much do I need to live where I live? And what am I
Important.
going to do to figure that out? Yep. And living
Important.
in Boston is not cheap. And I really was not interested in moving back in with my parents. Love them, but I was happy being independent. So I ended up working for Apple. I just had been there as a customer so frequently for issues with my computer that one day one of the technicians made a joke, "Hey, Alex, do you just want to work here? Like you spend so much time here anyway." And I was like, "Please don't spit your tea out." But
You
I
again.
said,
You
yeah,
again.
"Oh, no, truly." Like they would, I mean, it is if anyone that works in the tech world, there's this running joke, especially if you work on the technical side or the repair side, or you do customer service. It's like, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on every time that somebody has an issue? I swear, I walked in with my computer. I'm, a tornado, and they're like, "Oh, here she is again." I go
Yep.
right up to the Genius Bar. I sit down. They're like, "Alex, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on?" And I'm like, yes. And half the time the answer was definitely no. And the other half the time they're like, oh, were you just clicking cancel or escape on a message that kept coming up telling you to update your computer? I'm like, yes, because I was trying to do my homework. They're like, just figure it out. So anyway, I ended up interviewing to work there. No expectations, no pressure because it was sort of, all right, I need a job. I don't know what job. And in my interview, they had asked me, well, what are your career goals? And at the time I was 22 years old, I said,
Right.
I want to be a physical therapist in the NBA. And they said, are you aware that you're interviewing to work at a tech company? And I obviously said yes. And then they proceeded to ask me a bunch of questions about my knowledge base on the CEO of Apple, the history of Apple, the operating systems that were currently available on the technology. And I failed all aspects of that. So I really thought I bombed the interview.
Crashed and burned.
Like absolute crash and burn. So much so that I called the next day and tried to basically redo my interview over the phone.
You know that
And that's
question you
a
asked me? Let me answer that
I
one.
really did. They said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "Hey, remember you asked me why I wanted to work at Apple, and I gave you a whole bunch of reasons." And I really like got on my soapbox and tried to give them this whole other answer. And the manager on the other end of the line, he had said, "Oh, I guess the hiring manager hasn't called you yet," and he hung up the phone. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, does that mean I have a job, or does that mean that I'm never going to hear from them again? And I waited a whole week for that. I'm stressed out. I'm like, why am I stressed out? I don't even know if I want to work there. But fast forward, I ended up falling into a role in business development. And business development at Apple is really interesting on the retail side because you work with small to medium sized businesses, and your whole job is to understand how they choose their infrastructure, how they make decisions, what their company culture is, what their
Right.
refresh cycle on their technology is. And I promise you, we're going to get back to talking about performance in a
No, you're
moment
fine.
because
Go
this is
ahead.
all very related. But I got to interface with CEOs of companies. I got to interface with visionaries. I got to interface with HR, the technical side, and I would have these conversations, and I would be the person that was running meetings with all of these people to try and get them to be on the same page or understand why they weren't, or how they were trying to move the needle within their company. So what is your vision? What does that look like? What is your mission? And I fell into the healthcare tech vertical in Boston. So I ended up being able to use a lot of my clinical skills and a lot of my medical background to have conversations with people coming out of MIT, Harvard, Kendall Square of Cambridge is known as sort of the Silicon Valley of the East Coast. So
Okay.
I was learning a lot about new technologies that were coming into the medical space, and I was helping them understand how to bring technology into that. Now, none of this had a direct relation to clinical practice for me, but it was very easy for me to see how technology was going to become such a big part of my professional life. And so it was important for me to understand how to use it. And so 1 year goes by and I'm still there, and I'm recognizing that I'm doing a lot of things that were really important to me from a career standpoint. I'm interacting with people. I'm getting to affect change. I'm part of a community. I'm helping people realize dreams that they didn't think were possible. I am watching companies grow in front of my eyes, and I get to participate in that. I am helping realign perspective. I am a partner. I'm working in a team. And all of these things are what I was interested in doing in the healthcare space, but I
Hmm.
was getting to do it in a lot of ways on a larger scale where I could see that return on my investment of my time and the influence that I had, because of the relationships that I built. I would joke that my title was really just a relationship manager, because I was facilitating how people moved through our system and how they purchased things, but then how I made sure that when those things weren't working to the best of their ability, what resources did we need to bring to the table? And so 1 year goes by, I try and quit because I'm like, I have to go to PT school, it's time. And they're like, well, what if we give you this and this opportunity? And I said, okay, fine. So I end up staying. Another year goes by. I'm still learning. I'm still feeling like I am being let in on a secret that most people within our space don't really get an opportunity to do. So fast forward, it's 4 years in, and I had some out of work opportunities that started to change my mindset on my timeline. And at this point, I'm in sort of my mid 20s. And that's when people start to ask you questions about what you're going to do with the rest of your life, because they're
Okay.
wondering why you're working at Apple when you're an athletic trainer and
Right.
you have desires of being a physical therapist. So I started to think a little bit differently, and I felt like the time just hit me in the face. So I was interviewing to go take a job a little bit higher up, which would be a career opportunity at Apple. And obviously, that was really enticing to me, but it was the crossroads. And I
Right.
had two choices. So I made the other choice, and I ended up cold turkey quitting, but ultimately demoting myself to the lowest level so I could continue to make some sort of income while I took my prereq classes.
Right.
But I just went all in and applied to PT school. And in that time, I knew I was falling in love with the weight room, because I had had a couple knee surgeries at that time, including a second ACL surgery, that I was actively going through while I was working at Apple. And the weight room became my best friend. And for the
Okay.
first time, that's not something that I had learned earlier in my life. I had been a pretty high level soccer player and really never been particularly introduced to the weight room, because at that time it wasn't a non negotiable. It was, well, you have a couple choices. You can either train more from a soccer side of things, or you can go to the gym. And when I was growing up, having a ton of overseas coaches, and that's no knock on them, but it was very much like, go do more skills, go do more drills, go do more running, do on field stuff. And no one was telling me, go get in the weight room, because that's the thing that's going to build your resiliency. So I was going through this personal evolution, the professional evolution, and I knew, based on my extensive experience in being a patient of physical therapy, that the underpinning education that I would get from working as a strength coach or personal trainer was probably going to be the most valuable thing that I could have done for myself to be the best physical therapist I wanted to be. So the period of time in the middle when I left Apple prior to attending PT school was me applying to PT school thinking that that's where I was going to go, needing to have a hip surgery at that time. So I was trying to find a job that was going to hold me over until I started PT school. And I obviously wanted to work as a personal trainer or strength coach, but no one is going to hire a personal trainer or strength coach with no experience on crutches. So I had this like,
I don't know. Don't lose your train of thought. I'm gonna go through several things here real quick that you brought
yeah,
up that
sure.
are that maybe at the time you didn't think were critical, but made you the professional that you are today and will be in the future. One is understanding the business side.
Mm,
Going to Apple, seeing what's going on, how business works. A lot of times, if you're like me, it was the old beat your head up against the wall technique.
hmm.
When I started, because I although I worked with teams, always worked in a consulting role. So I was part of a team. I was part of a lot of teams, but as a contractor,
Yep.
never officially part of X or X because I didn't want to be. I didn't want. I wanted to have the freedom to disagree. Put it that way. Just say it that way.
Which is, I mean, I think that's very smart, and I see the lifestyle that contractors live, myself included at this point, is actually you have a lot of luxuries that if you are a direct employee of a team or of an organization, that's not just exclusive to teams. You have a lot more rules, a lot less autonomy of your time, for better, for worse. I mean, there's kind
Yeah,
of
and
ups and
it's
downsides, but yeah.
if I was working for your European soccer coaches, and I worked with a lot of them. I owned a USL team for a while, a
Hmm.
women's W League team.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and because I had a gym facility, first thing we did when the team got put together was went straight to the weight room.
Hmm.
Um,
Brilliant.
and this was 2010 ish.
Wow.
Well,
So you were really ahead of the curve.
prior to that, I was working with my daughter's soccer team, and they couldn't understand why she was able to do a lot of things that some of the other girls couldn't do. And I said because she's in the weight room. So all of a sudden, I got an
Hmm.
influx of soccer players in the weight room, and I had to explain over and over to coaches that the weight room is not there to take away from what you're doing. It's there to add to, be of value to you. Here's how that works. And then
Right.
you go through those conversations, but understanding the business side of it, the finances, and a lot of times that's working through your own finances going, they're not paying me anything. So how do
Hmm.
I can't sleep on this cot the rest of my life. So
Yep.
dealing with that, building the relationships and the soft skills, all those things you did at Apple are sometimes, or I will say even oftentimes missed in the linear path to wherever you're going in this profession, whether it's peak strength coach, nutritionist, whatever. Sometimes those are missed because you get stuck in this. It's a silo, is what it is, because we're not
Hmm.
outside that. You get stuck in everything to improve performances right here when it's really not.
Yep.
It's bits and
And
pieces of everything. Go ahead.
no, you are making my case for why it stayed so long, and that wasn't lost on me. As I said, I mean, me being there for 4 years was an accident, but it was incredibly intentional. I submitted my letter of resignation 3 times in the time that I was there, and they gave me reasons to stay, and those reasons were not about my career at Apple. Those reasons were about the skills I was developing that were 100% going to be invaluable to me when I decided it was the time to go back into the health and performance space directly. And I mean, I had extensive training on conflict resolution. I led a team of 20 people. I managed multi-million dollar accounts. I had to learn how to give and receive feedback and what that means. I mean, actual training on how to deliver and receive feedback across a hierarchical structure. I learned how to interact with people that I may feel like I had nothing in common with, how to classify people into our different archetypes, and how to work with individuals and how to have transformational experiences when it would be so easy to be transactional, how to care for
Right.
humans that you don't know. I mean, it's, all of those things were probably things that I had a propensity for. Because I'm a very outgoing, compassionate person, but
Right.
it really brought life to the language around how to develop those skills, how to lean into what would be considered my towering strengths, how to develop my strengths, and how to work on my areas of opportunity. And it oriented me to my own professional development. When I talk to young students or kids about where they want to go, I say, if you don't know what you want, go work at Apple. You'll figure it out.
Well, the big word in performance has been the last 5 or 6 years holistic. We want to take a holistic
Mm,
approach, yada yada yada, but you don't have holistic skills. You haven't learned how to operate as a team. You haven't
hmm.
learned, how to, talk finances with the athletic director,
Yep.
because as an athletic trainer, you need more than tape. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And pre-read.
Yeah.
So you haven't
100%.
you haven't learned how to sit down with parents and discuss why an athlete should be doing this, and maybe less less camps and more preparation.
And
Those kind
those
of
are
things.
hard conversations to have,
Yes.
and even at the level that I am working at. So obviously, like I said, I'm working with primarily NBA players.
Right.
That's a very similar. It's a similar issue with regard to they will have someone who does everything for them, and they might have all these different individuals, and it's very difficult to get them all on the same page, whether it be privately within their organization. And I don't think it's any specific fault of any one person a
No,
lot of
no,
the
it's
time.
it's
It is a matter of people don't see it as that. They don't see it as, okay, if I want to have a holistic, if I want to have all these people, that's fine, but somebody's got to be the quarterback.
okay. So you're either the wheel or the spoke.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
if you're the wheel, that means you're the director. So everything is
Yep.
is is you're circling everything and getting it to work on the athlete, who is the hub, and the spokes are everybody that's going in and touching the athlete, the hub. So you're touching
Yep.
everybody else out here, and somehow you have to bring them together so that the athlete is strong in the center. When you're
And if
talking,
there's one, yep. No, you
no,
go.
go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to say that is definitely that is probably the thing, the element that I am the best at within my skill set. So not necessarily better than other people, but something that it's very difficult for me to ignore that, because I think that it creates a perception for the athlete that if something doesn't go right, I'm not comfortable dying on that stake unless I feel like we are all on the same page. Like if they feel
Right.
like, oh, this wasn't the outcome I was looking for, well, it's like, okay, well, what are all the other interventions, or what are all the other people? Who are all the other people that have been involved? And are we all on the same page? Because if we're all trying to do different things and you don't get the outcome that you're looking for, well, that's the problem. Inherently, that's the problem. Even if
Yeah.
all the people were, yeah, had the same goals in mind, if we're not
It's
aligned on how we're going to approach them.
it's not enough, and I'm sure you realize this now in your career. It's not enough to just all want the same thing. We all want top performance. That's the goal. Performance for the athlete. Improve performance, return to prior performance if it's an injury or whatever. But how are we getting there? There's more than one
Hmm.
right way to do things, but only one correct direction to go. So if you're going
Mm.
that way and I'm going that way, we're not going to get there. We
We are
both have to
taking
be,
away from that.
yeah, we both
Yep.
have to be going towards the center,
Sure.
towards the athlete. But I am, and one of the reasons we don't, as we talked about earlier, we don't script anything, because these things are a lot of things that are important in this profession to the athlete or the coach you're trying to assist or the team in helping to improve performance that almost has zero to do with actual performance. We all know how to program.
Yep.
We all know how to we all know how to get back to we all know how to return to play. There's steps. You can't just go from surgery's over, formal rehab's over, go back out on the field. You're going to be just like you were before. We all know that's not true.
Yep.
Somehow we don't all go there. Somehow the doctor says you're cleared and you see that athlete back out on the field. Or that athlete wants to go back out on the field many times after, especially at the professional level. Once they're cleared by the physician, they think, hey, it's time to go get back on the field. Not yet, buddy. Slow down there, Missy, because we don't want you to re-injure or do more damage or additional damage if we don't go through these steps. And having those
Sure.
conversations are part of the soft skills you learned at Apple. See how I tied that all back together? But I think it's
Oh yeah, no, that was well done. Thank you.
I think that's important for our listeners right now. And coming from someone who's in the field right now, who's lived it, who's gone through it, and you telling, especially the next generation, hey, look, don't be afraid to learn something else because it's going to help you do what you really want to do if it's what you should be doing. If that made any sense. So
Yeah, it did make a lot of sense. So my PT school friends were all quite a bit younger than I was, and we had a running joke. So I met most of them when they were 21 years old, and I was probably close to 28 at this time. Now, in the grand scheme of life, that's not a big difference, but as
right.
far as how much life change you go
Oh
through
yeah.
between
Oh
being
yeah.
21 and being 28, and especially, I think I had a disproportionate amount of change, and anyone that knows me would not find that surprising at all. But we had this running joke because I would start to tell a story and I would say, oh, when I was working at the healthcare tech company, they're like, what? Or I'd say, oh, when I was a live-in nanny, they're like, when did you have time to do all of this?
Yeah.
What are you, a cat? Do you have 9 lives? I made a joke that it was by design. Everything that I have done in my life, I could tie back to how those experiences have influenced what I do today. Being a live-in nanny for 4 years, raising someone else's children, how that ties into how I work as a physical therapist, working at Apple, some of the things that we've already talked about. And so I have this mantra. Someday it'll probably be the title of my memoir, but it's 99 by design. So I've had 99 lives, but they are by design. They are incredibly intentional. They all contribute to where I am today. And to your point, anyone that's coming into this field, or has aspirations of working in this, I think there's a lot of value, especially at that time when you don't have the direct
Excuse me.
opportunity in front of you. Bless you. Go do
Thank you.
something else. Go do something, especially when you're in your early 20s or you're just finishing undergrad or something like that. Yes, absolutely make sure that you have the skills within the profession or within your chosen field, but go do something outside of it. Go have an experience that has nothing to do with this world because I promise you it will be formative on some level. It's either going to teach you that you don't have the skills that you thought you had, or it's going to give you skills that absolutely have the ability to contribute to who you are within this profession, even if you can't see it at the moment.
I'm pretty big on the psychological side of everything performance and everything life. Actually, I'm a big believer in controlling your own purpose.
Mm, me
Mm,
too.
a lot of folks let circumstances, other people, whatever, control why they do something. Those life may get control of what you're doing for a while, like you had to have a job, so you go find a job.
Yep.
But purpose is different.
Hmm.
And if you're intentional and purposeful in the things that you do, sometimes your decisions can't be, but how you go about things can be. So if you do that, then you can always bring it back to what you want to do, which it sounds like what you've been very good at doing accidentally or on purpose.
Sometimes it's an accident, but then I figure out how to make it on purpose. I figure
What
out how to say, okay, what is this experience going to do for me, even if it wasn't the one I thought I was going to have.
and usually those are the ones that teach you the most.
Oh my gosh, I'm telling you, 3 times I wrote this letter. I was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm out. It's time. And they're like, well, and I'm like, oh, okay, you got me again. But
So
yeah.
now you're working. You worked at all levels with all different kinds of athletes,
Hmm.
and in basically three of the main areas of performance: strength coach,
Yep.
athletic trainer,
Yep.
physical therapist. Every athlete that spends any time past puberty as an athlete is going to see all three of those people
Yes.
and sometimes on a regular basis.
Hmm.
So when you started realizing that, so you kind of got into the weight room by because see, I didn't forget because you had some injuries you were trying to come back from.
Yep.
Um, so you got introduced to the weight room. I say late.
Definitely late.
And then your schooling was athletic training undergrad, and your graduate level work was in physical therapy. Now you're starting to tie all those together with the great information and experience you got from working at Apple and all those soft skills. So here you are, plop today. What is the best thing about today for you in this field, in this, in all of
Yeah.
this, working where you're working? What is the
Yeah. I think, and a lot of our conversation already has I think brought that to the forefront. I don't think it's very difficult to see. So I primarily work for one player. I travel with this player wherever he is. I handle all his performance coaching, his PT stuff throughout the off season, and I partner with the team that he plays for. And I bring in any additional resources. I work backwards from the KPIs that are set out from his team, but also the things that he has identified as elements that are really important to him. And I get to be quarterback. And it's a lot of problem solving, but also I get to continue to learn. I mean, it checks probably 95% of the boxes that I would want to check for my career development around who do I want to be, what do I want to do, how do I want to spend my days, because a lot of it comes from impact, and I can see the fruits of my labor with regard to if I set a plan in place and we achieve that plan, have we moved the needle on the things that we've identified are important? And if we haven't, I get to go back to the drawing board. I literally have a 15-foot whiteboard here that is
all right?
constantly my brainchild.
That's all
But
right.
that is, I mean, I think I hate to admit this because I don't know. I think there's always a negative connotation about when someone says that they're a control freak or when someone's identified as a control
No,
freak.
I get it.
I don't think that I have all the solutions, but I like to be able to participate in the entire plan from
I
A to B to C.
I work with I spend more time nowadays working with professionals like you who see I have three specialties: movement, energy systems, and management. People say
Mm,
management. What do you mean management? If you don't have a couple of management skills when you're doing this job, when you're in this profession, you're going to be in trouble. So you can't just throw out a plan there and think it's not going to be managed.
right.
So what I talk to with professionals like you are assess, train, test, analyze, compare, and no attack.
Hmm.
We attack everything. See
Yep.
that acronym right there?
I like it.
So we attack everything. So and a lot of times they say, well, what do you mean? So okay, well, let's take a step back. Did we assess that? What was the outcome? Did we set up training to fix, improve, whatever we're trying to accomplish? Did we set up training to do that? And when's the next time you're going to test it? When will you know? When is that being tested? Is it a formal test? Is it an informal test? Okay, and then after you test, what is it all about? You got to
Yep.
analyze it, right? Then you got to compare it to where you were before, and you got to compare it to the the needs and desires of the team, the needs and desires of the athlete, the needs and the demands of the sport. So if you're doing all these things because the team and the athlete says, "Hey, I want this," but and you have a low post player as a basketball player, right? But he's not very strong, and he's getting pushed all over the paint. How do you know he's getting pushed all over the paint? Well, because that's part of your job as a manager. You got to be able to go look at the film and say, "Okay, you stepped here to position yourself for a rebound, and you ended up out here not on purpose. So you got pushed out of the way." And he has to understand that, although he probably already does, or she probably already does. So when I'm talking to professionals like you, that's the kind of the map I use. So then
Hmm.
you guys start you tell me everything and I go, okay, either you got this problem solved or probably need to test it a little more often because your training looks good but you don't know anything because you haven't tested it. You don't
Yep.
know if it's working or not. And sometimes it's right in front of you, it's working, but you haven't looked at it.
Right.
So
And this is, I mean, this is really to further answer your question. I ask people to go over what I'm doing with a fine tooth comb. I ask people to poke holes in my process because I am constantly trying to make sure my process is continuing to get better. And some of that it comes from, I mean, there's yes, a trial and error element, but I know what this goes back to how Apple influences for me. I know what my towering strengths are. I know what my strengths are. I know what my opportunities are. So in the bucket of opportunities, I pick 2 to 3 things that I'm going to actively work on and I make those things known and I am willing to embarrass myself or be vulnerable or
right.
ask for guidance in those areas because I am 100% sure that I am not the best at those things, but that doesn't mean that I don't get to work with the people I get to work with. It just means that I'm going to check myself and I'm going to ask other people to check my work. And if I live that way,
Yeah,
myself and the people that I work with are never going to fail.
I think as professionals we grow as a profession and as professionals when we let others examine our work. When
Yes,
when when when
absolutely.
when we don't want that, when we shy away from that or when we're pushing other people out because we don't like the way they do things or we believe our way is the best, then that level of hubris always sets you up for trouble. So
Absolutely.
we talk on this show. We talk about a lot of things. Sometimes we talk about programming. Sometimes we talk about the profession. We talk a lot about the individual that we're talking to, like we're doing today. But the one thing we probably don't talk enough about is how can at each level we help those who are coming after us. I don't like to say below because you guys are too smart for me to say below. You know, so,
Mm,
but you're coming after we did. There's some things that I learned that you might need to or want to learn.
right.
But there's also when we talk about hubris, when you get to be long in the tooth, you can't think that you're so smart or your knowledge base is so broad that there's nothing for you to learn. Like you said, there's always new technology,
Always.
and I feel like I've been running catch up on technology since 2002. But anyway,
Well, I mean, me too. And it's evolving at such a rapid rate that I don't think that I ever can. So I try and I don't know. I think, like I said, we've talked about this. The invaluable experience that I had was going deep enough into how technology is involved that I can at least, as they say, it's like I can hang. I
okay,
can
so
I can try.
there you go. You notice how I brought that back to technology. I ain't too
Yes.
bad at this. What I want, what,
You've been doing this a long time. I see
what,
you.
what I really want to know about the technology part and data and gathering data and data analysis from you, your opinion. How
Hmm.
much is enough and how much data
Mm,
is too much?
sure. Yeah. I would say that I'm probably a tech promoter. However, to your point, how much is too much and how do I make decisions with that? It's, in team sport, especially in basketball, I mean, you want for nothing when it comes to utility of technology. You can have most things that you want to
Right.
be able to use. Um, and that's been an interesting sort of switch for me, is to go from that to the private side, where not
Yeah.
only am I don't have access to a lot of that technology just because it is resource intensive and
Right.
expensive, and for one individual, what is enough? But it's also a matter of I have to be able to fit it in a suitcase that can only be 50
Right.
pounds.
Right. Right.
So,
Look,
yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
So I guess, well, I'll say I ask myself a lot of questions. So I say, what is, man, it's funny because this whole conversation, every road leads back to things that I learned working at a tech company. But
That's
I ask myself, what is the budget?
yeah.
What is the learning curve to use the technology? So
Yep.
am I skilled at using it? What is the budget or the price point of the technology? How disruptive is it going to be to the athlete? What information is it going to give me? And is that
Yeah.
holistic information or is that nuanced information?
Yeah.
And if
What's the
that is
return? Yeah.
nuanced, yep. So if that is nuanced information, meaning it's maybe in a very specific area, does that information matter for the output of the athlete, or what
Right.
I've identified as the rate limiter, or what the team has identified as the rate limiter?
So you're
And
smarter than me. I just say, can I use
yeah, well,
it?
so the other thing, again, in my work is I have to be really confident in everything that I'm doing, to the extent that if I ask an athlete to change something, whether that
Yeah.
be to wear something new, track something new, try something new, I have to be willing to die on that stake. I have to be willing to take the repercussions of when it doesn't go well, or troubleshooting, or accuracy, or hang my hat on that piece of information. So I'll give you an example. I really wanted to use a GPS unit this summer because I think that would have been the best version of comprehensive information based on things that I wanted to that we wanted to work on. However, to use the individual units, you have to get the whole bra set up,
Yeah.
because and that would be kind of disruptive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Uh,
so we ended up choosing sort of a lesser version. I use a Morpheus heart rate monitor, which was
okay.
developed by Joel
Right.
Jameson,
Right.
which is what we had used last summer. And that's enough. That's probably enough. Is it
Yeah.
great? No. But is it giving me information that is valuable? Sure. Is it comprehensive? Yes. Is it something that the athlete is willing to wear? Yes. And then we looked at other ways of doing this.
You can't. You have to be convincing, and you kind of gotta, especially with professional athletes, because they've grown up with certain routines, and while that routine may slowly evolve over time, it's hard to get athletes, having been an athlete, not at the level some of these guys are, but having been an athlete, to get them to do something different immediately that's drastic,
Yep.
and especially if they've had success. You know, if they've had a certain level of success, hey, I got here doing this. I want to keep doing it because I know it works.
Hmm.
Now you're back to your soft skills. Hey, this new piece of technology here at Apple. We want you to try it out. How do you do that? How do you bring it on board?
Hmm.
How do you get that to work? You know, you
So,
go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was going to say this is so bringing it back to the time I spent in business development. I had a boss that did a really good job of aligning our team around common language. So when we looked at our quarter quarterly anticipated closing, so we were looking at what deals did we think we were going to close, how much money we were going to make over the quarter. He would ask us to answer these six questions for ourselves. And if we could answer those six questions, it would increase our confidence level that the deal was going to close. And if we couldn't answer those questions, well, it gave us the answers to the test.
Right,
Go get the go get the answers to those questions, and you will know, are you
right,
going to make $100,000 or are you not? And the conversation we're having now, I use this often in my clinical and my performance practice, because this is how I improve my confidence level of whether I should make a decision.
right.
And it was called Hope Alley. And it was sort of a play on words, because if you don't have the answers to these questions, then you're just You're just hoping. You're just hoping that something's going to happen. And
Yeah.
if you, even in the space that we work in, hope is very scary.
Yeah. I mean,
It's good to
yeah.
be optimistic, but hoping means that you're really just putting something into the ether. So the questions were time frame. What is the time frame that this is going to happen? So for me, I'm in the off season right now. How quickly can I get this up and running? Competition. So, are there alternative options for the type of technology that I'm going to
Right.
use? And if there are, have I considered all of them? Decision makers and stakeholders. So, who needs to be involved in this
Right.
conversation? And am I making this unilaterally, et cetera? Budget, as we've
Right.
already talked about, that one's easy. Compelling event. So, what's causing us to want to use this new technology? Did he have an injury in the previous season? Are we trying something new? Are our priorities different, et cetera? And then support and services. So, do I, as the person implementing it, have the skill set to use this?
Right.
And if I don't, who's going to help me do it? And if I need to troubleshoot it, do I have enough knowledge or resources to be able to troubleshoot it in the moment? Because then, in a very 5 months for an off season seems like a long time. It's
No.
not.
No.
So if I answer all those questions, I mean, off the bat, most of the time the answer is probably no, I don't want to use this because if unless I can start using it within 2 days,
Right.
that's a really big undertaking. And you already told me I have two jobs. I've just added a
Right.
third job, which is tech
Yep.
support.
Yep. So having spent most of my career in the private sector, having worked with single athletes, small groups, whatever, I understand. A lot of people say, well, you work with one professional athlete, you get to travel everywhere with him. I know you're taken care of, blah, 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 blah. They don't understand the level of responsibility you take when you take on one person.
And I take that very seriously.
When
I,
you take on one person, that person has come to you and has said, either in action or words, hey, I believe you are the one that can get me where I need and want to be. So what do you need? What do you need from me? Let's go. And athletes tend to dump that trust in a bucket. Now they may take a while to empty the bucket. They just try you out for a couple of months, see what you're doing for a couple of months, and then all of a sudden you have that talk where they want the whole shebang. They want everything. But they also reserve the right to tell you suck.
yep.
Hey, you
Yeah,
suck.
and that's you
That I
got to
mean,
be yes.
they reserve that right. If you're not, if you're not holding up your end of the bargain, you're not communicating not only to them but to everybody that touches them. And if you don't know something before they know it, there's a problem.
Hmm. Yep. You got to be 5 steps ahead all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And it's one of those deals where I think with bringing it back to this podcast, this is the information that I foresaw when I started this podcast. I didn't, there's enough technical podcasts I call technical podcasts where you talk about programming or you talk about this.
Sure.
There's enough of those out there and they're great. I have no problem with any of them. I actually listened to a bunch of them. And we talk about some of that stuff here. But when you get right down to it, it's really all about relationships, right?
Hmm.
So as we start to wrap this podcast up, what are you telling those coming behind you, those at where you are, and those ahead of you? What are you telling them? What's your best advice to newbies, so to speak, seasoned veterans like yourself who are still right in the heart of your career, and old guys like me? What are you telling all three groups?
Yeah, I don't think it would surprise anyone to hear this piece of advice, but take pride in everything that you do. And if you don't feel like you can take pride in what you're doing, do something else
I like
because
it.
you're going to work for a really long time. And I recently remembered this phrase that was brought to me when I worked. I worked with the Philippine national rugby team, and we traveled to Dubai, and I got to participate in some really important cultural experiences with them. And they taught me
Yeah.
some of the language, and they had this phrase in Tagalog, which is a native language in the Philippines, and we used it around orienting yourself for rugby, it's putak, which is a mix of the word for heart and the word for head. And when you put it together, it's putak, and it means the balance of heart and head in everything
Okay.
that you do.
I
My
like it.
head is how I choose my job. My heart is how I choose my purpose. And
Okay.
so there's an element of, if you look at my whole history and you look at all the things that I've done, there's this winding road of different experiences I've had that can be very clearly directly related to what I do now and maybe indirectly related to what I do now. My head is how I choose my job. You touched on this earlier with you have to have a job, you have to figure out how you're going to make
Right.
money. But my heart is how I know what my purpose is. And that has not changed for me in the 15 years that I have been working in this industry or chasing my desires to be in this industry, and it's evolved in what it looks like. But I think that's probably the biggest advice that I give to people is, yes, have your job, but also identify your purpose, but have those things be, what can you take pride in? Because if you do that, you're going to be satisfied with what you do for the rest of your life.
All right. So you kind of answered that question uniquely. Well, most people say, well, for the younger folks, I would do this, and for this,
uh,
and but you
I
hit
don't think
every
it's different.
you hit it. Yeah, and that's great. That's outstanding, actually. One of the I just had a question, man. That's terrible.
It's okay. To be honest, I was looking at my hand. I just got a tattooed on my hand. I did this a couple of years ago. Traveled to Dubai with them, and it had taken me a long time to find the right person to do the tattoo. And I saw it, and I was like, wow, that's the advice.
Yeah, I mean that. I mean, you can't make it more direct than succinct. So it's one word, right?
Yep,
Single word. Say
one
it again.
word. Putak.
Who
It
talk?
sounds like a bad word, but
No, I got you. I'm right with you. But I
make sure you
got
get
you.
the K at the end,
Yeah, get the
because
K. Don't mess it up. Yeah. So what's next? What would you like to be next for you after this? Have you thought about it?
yeah, I mean, anyone that knows me knows I have A through F contingency plan all the time. I think, yeah, what is next for me
No,
after this?
say it.
Yeah, I know it. I know it. Control freak. Yep, here we are. I am trying to do less of planning what's next, because I think, as much as I would be someone considered established in the profession, I'm young. I'm really young in this profession, and I want to spend a couple really good years of having someone call me and say, "Hey, Alex, what's new? How are you?" And me having absolutely nothing to say, because nothing's new, because I'm doing the same thing and I'm just continuing to hone my craft. And I look forward to having more of that, because I've had so much change over the past couple of years, and I think there's an element of, it's starting to stabilize. So it gives me an opportunity to dig a little deeper and look at how I want to build
Don't
more
don't.
skills here.
I
So
hate I hate to sound like dad or old uncle or grandpa here.
it's Father's Day. This is perfect.
What
Yeah,
but
give me your dad advice.
but to tell you the same thing I tell my I tell my daughter, right? Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
And
Yeah,
when you
that's
when
I.
when I
Yeah,
say don't worry about it, don't stress, don't do you boo boo.
that's perfect.
Yeah,
That's perfect.
don't
You're right.
don't
I
don't
am.
don't I spent so much time worried about how I was going to get to what I wanted to be next, that there were gaps in my life where I didn't really enjoy it.
Yeah,
I can't say I didn't learn anything, but I didn't learn what I could have learned,
right,
which frustrates me more as an old guy. The things I could have learned if I'd have stopped and said, just be here.
right.
Just be
And
here.
that's where I am. I love what I
Good.
do. I'm lucky, but also I'm lucky because I was really intentional, and I I have no complaints. Not
So
real ones.
so check it out. I tell everybody that you'll get another call from me in the future, wanting you to come back on so we can figure out where you jump to, where you beam to from here.
Hmm.
So
Good.
be ready for that.
I look
One,
forward to it.
the second one is we will let you know when this airs. It'll probably be sometime in July. But it's been a pleasure having you on, and I know for a fact that you didn't anticipate a podcast like this one.
Not at all, but I
So, but
really, really appreciate it.
it's
It's rare that I
it's
get an opportunity to talk about that. So,
here's the deal, right? In performance, all those things are important, and the reason they're important is because if they're not squared away, there's no way you can do your job. Okay, if you're not financially squared away, it's hard to do your job when you're trying to figure out how you're going to eat. That's everywhere. If you don't have your communication skills together, hard to do your job. I'm going to assume you know how to program, you know how to set up a rehabilitation program, you know how to set up a strength program, and all those things. But it's going to become very clear if you're working for me, working with me, or if I'm just watching you work. It would be very clear. She has no idea what she's talking about.
yep,
You know what I mean?
yep,
At the very least, she can't communicate what she's talking about.
sure.
So, but you don't have any problems with that. I appreciate you coming on,
Thank
taking
you
the
very much.
call, and we'll
Yeah, it's
see.
been a pleasure. It really
And
has.
we'll see you again, ladies and gentlemen. It's been Alex Hubelbank here on Performance Talk, and we're out.